Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Art Bros. What's up, people? You got me, Mike, as always, and Fancy Dave here. And a special guest from the Lonely Pallete podcast. We have Tamar Avishai. Tamar, say hello to the people, please.
Hello.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Tamar.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're really excited to talk about Edgar Degas, the rehearsal of the Ballet Onstage with you. You actually picked this one, so thank you.
Oh, well, I was trying to think of something that would be as juicy as possible, kind of give you as much bang for the buck.
Oh,
there's juice, and it's juicy.
I can't wait. I love your tone. Let's get started on this thing. Let's not keep the people waiting. Let me give some basics. This is Edgar Degas, people. You've heard the name. This is from around 1874, and it's made in oil. This is the version at the Met, because as we've learned, there are multiple versions. And as Tamar has put it, this is the best one. This is the one he was trying to do. So Tamar, give us your lowdown on this, please.
Okay. Well, sometimes artists need a couple takes, like podcasters, to get it right. So you'll see a lot of different versions of the same painting as they're trying to work it out. But this is such a great example of Degas. Should I just get started?
Please.
Okay. Degas is always lumped together as an impressionist with Monet and Renoir and that whole crew, and he was not an impressionist. He didn't consider himself an impressionist. He considered himself a realist, like Courbet. He thought that he was really kind of painting the world as it was happening and as it really looked, kind of warts and all, unvarnished, moments in between. He loved catching people, not at their most beautiful and their most elegant and graceful, but at their most human. And so you get these dancers that we associate with, kind of the elegance of ballet on stage, and we get them yawning and scratching and stretching themselves, and it's
a couple of other unsavory elements that could be there.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
This is not what you think of when you think of the ballet, especially on a stage, and if I could just interrupt you for a second, the vantage point I read that we're looking at from would be reserved for like the emperor or someone of high nobility. And we're looking at these dancers from an emperor's point of view, scratching and yawning and just not being very ballet-like. But anyways, Tamar, you can please.
Oh, well, it's just, Degas really liked showing, he himself was pretty bougie, but he really liked showing workers and the labor class. And these girls they were called the ballet rats, the lower class girls who would be in the ballet corps. And they were laborers in their own way, and he was really interested. We're not seeing a performance, we're seeing a rehearsal. And we're not even seeing a rehearsal, we're seeing the kind of downtime during the rehearsal where everybody's doing their own thing. And so you really do see the labor that goes into ballet. And he was really interested in showing that both here and in his really famous sculpture, the 14-year-old dancer, where you're getting girls in their awkwardness and in their, like I said, their kind of in-between moments, and showing kind of the blood, sweat, and tears that really goes into this kind of performance.
Right.
And so there are just a lot of different elements going on. There are the class of the dancers on stage. There are the men that are on stage that represent a different class.
Those guys are creepy.
Yeah.
They're totally creepy, and they're meant to be creepy. There's a name for them. They were called the abonnés, the season subscribers, who, because they paid a little more, they got this kind of, quote unquote, backstage access.
They're perks, the membership perks.
Yeah, they're pervy perks.
Yeah.
And so, you have this like the ballet in general. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. In the middle of the 19th century in Paris, you have this incredible renovation of the city, Haussmannization, where all of these buildings are torn down and you end up with what Paris looks like today. Paris once upon a time looked like Venice, kind of all of these like very tight little corridors. And large plazas. And after haussmanization, we get the 5-story cream colored apartment buildings and these really big boulevards that open up onto big, beautiful buildings like the Champs-Élysées, well, not a building, but
Yeah, we
these
know what
kind
you're
of
talking
vistas,
about. Yeah.
and the Opera House.
Ooh.
And so the Opera House, in this period of middle class kind of bourgeois fashions, everybody's wearing the same thing, everybody's going to the opera, and this bourgeoisie class use the opera to see and be seen. That's how it was called. That it's like it's not about the performance, it's about being seen
So it's
at the
like being in
opera.
an Apple store.
Exactly. And so it's like, so that's why we're seeing not the performance but the audience kind of looking at the performance, and they represent this class that have this kind of ownership over this gaze onto these girls. And it's really kind of, I mean, it's totally pervy, but it's
Very.
also kind of interesting because it's like if these girls aren't being shown in a performance that we think of, like what it would be like if this was a painting of them performing on stage. It's like Degas captures them still being watched, still being seen, but seen as human beings, seen in their in between girlishness. And so it's a total subversion of what it is to perform.
Interesting. So it's kind of like he's giving them back their dignity by showing them at their most human, their most like
Mm, yeah, I don't know if
something like
dignity
that.
is the right word.
Well, I didn't mean dignity. I mean like when I say dignity, I mean I look at those pervs over there in the back, and
Like,
like it's just
yeah,
it's not really right for them to be looking at these women.
I mean, thematically going to the, I guess, the voyeuristic aspect of that, these guys looking at them. Like, it even fits into the composition, forming a triangle from the girls narrowing down into the two guys on chairs looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally a triangle
So like
towards them.
I really like what you say about this painting, and just kind of calling those guys out.
Yeah.
Just really, that's awesome. I love it. So I just have a quick question about Degas. If you maybe you're not the person to answer this, but maybe you can be.
Okay, I'll do what I can.
Thank you. Why do people lump him in with the Impressionists? Do you know why?
Because he exhibited with them.
Oh, so that's it.
So yeah,
But-
he was in their circles, but he didn't kind of submit to their values. He did it in a really different way, actually, because this idea that you could paint life as it was happening, paint life really in real time, that is so crucial to the Impressionist movement, because that's what they're doing, right? It's like they're showing their brushstrokes, they're getting an impression of something as it's happening. With Monet, it's light. It's with something really fleeting and ephemeral, and so it's like, if you can capture light as it's happening, then you don't have a lot of time, and you can end up with this really brushworky painting that we associate, thick brushstrokes that we associate with Impressionism. And the Degas version of that is capturing life as it's being lived like this,
I see.
really kind of showing life like it looked like, instead of, I mean, up until this point, at least the art that they were still pushing back against, as, why they had their independent exhibitions, was because the Salon wanted big history paintings of allegorical and biblical and mythological scenes. And it's like, even if those mythologies were referring to something that was happening at the time, politically or societally, they weren't showing it like this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, well, anyway, going back to that point, the Salon was like the big, they were, the art scene. At least, like, we are the official art scene of France.
Mm-hmm.
But they were pushing against that because, as we said, they're very elitist. Like, very. Very.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was for the aristocracy. It's just, there wasn't a whole lot of like Marxism pushing into the museums yet.
I see. And just like a quick note too, this painting was actually rejected by what am I looking at here? It was rejected by the Illustrated London News because it was deemed too inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so a
Yeah.
little bit of dirtiness there.
Well, I saw that. I actually read that article myself as just kind of a debrief.
Hmm.
And I, what that actually reminded me of was Manet, who was another really important realist, who kind of straddled that line. He was kind of the granddaddy of Impressionism, but wasn't really an Impressionist. He was much more of a realist, like Courbet and like Degas, really interested in life as it was being lived. And his famous painting that was rejected by the Salon, actually, well, I don't want to be wrong. So the Déjeuner Sourd was either rejected outright or it was accepted and laughed at. And I'm confusing that with Olympia. Whatever.
Right.
He had, two
It's
famous
one of
ones.
them. Yeah, we know what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, and Déjeuner Sourd was so scandalous because it was a naked woman with clothed men.
Yes.
And if it had been a naked woman with other naked men, no problem. And if it had been a clothed woman with clothed men, not a problem.
That's just too real
But-
right there.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, we want these girls to kind of be our fantasies, on stage and have this gracefulness, and we even accept that many of them were lower class. These little girls, like some of them were prostitutes, or they will be.
Right.
And for these pervs sitting in the corner,
Right.
and there's just kind of an interesting sense that it's like society can't handle looking at itself.
It can't. No. When you hold up a mirror, it looks away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, even though the opera is the place to be seen, you can't see them alongside these men because that's too scandalous.
And I love that. So, if people could take away one thing from this painting today after this episode, what would that be?
Oh God.
I'm gonna ask you the same thing, Fancy.
Okay, well, actually, because we haven't even gotten to the top of the double bass in the foreground,
This is true.
that this is a scene of modern life in 1874, in every possible dimension. So you have this class stratification, you have these moments kind of in between, which I actually like the idea that it's more dignified to be seen scratching just because it's more real.
Yes.
And then you have the very clear influence of photography,
Oh.
because you wouldn't have, if the top of a double bass was like photobombing your painting, you wouldn't paint it in because it would just be in the way. But this is really clearly looking at the composition that had been coming from photography. And, photography is developed in the 1830s and comes into more popular use in the 60s and 70s. And you have artists looking at, fine artists looking at kind of low artists or more popular art like photography.
Right.
And stealing from their composition. So you have this girl who's cut off on the side. You have this weird kind of jarring angle, and you have this double bass in the forefront. And it's like all of that gives a sense of snapshot.
Yes, that's the word. It definitely, and it adds that sense of realism. It adds the sense of a moment in time, a moment out of the world captured, like exactly what photography's doing.
Exactly. And like a second later, everyone would be in a different position. And you don't have that in fine art up until this point. You don't have, you have figures sitting in their perfect, kind of pyramidal compositions who won't move because they're posing, and there's nobody here who's posing. It is totally a snapshot of modern life. And that's cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, Tamar, thank you so much for speaking on Edgar Degas' beautiful painting here, and thank you for joining us so much. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Really. Thank you for having me.
This
what-
is fun.
Yeah, it was. Where can the people find you? Please, where are you located?
Well, you can find me on, the website is www.thelonelypalette.com. And it's also anywhere you get your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, Podcatcher, all those
All the good
that I
ones.
tune in, Google Play. And then also my Twitter is @LonelyPalette, and my Instagram is @TheLonelyPalette.
Yeah. We have different handles too for each of our social medias. Guys, listen to her podcast. It is some of the best explaining of art, best writing on art, because I know you write your episodes, and you have. I love your voice. You have a perfect voice for podcasting.
Oh, thank you.
Perfectly, like 100% recommended from the Art Bros. Check it out, guys. And from Mike, Fancy Dave, and our special guest Tamar, we will see you guys next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.